Right, guys, are you all feeling ready to work out?
Yeah.
8,287. All right, you better get going. Ready? Yes. Steady, go!
So today we'll be focusing on the controversial documentary by BBC Horizon, The Calorie Kitchen. Yummy, yummy, I want food in my tummy and I'm feeling it's alright. The Calorie Kitchen is a BBC Horizon special where the premise of it is almost like a reality TV show in that whatever calories are eaten by a certain sect within this social experiment then has to be burnt off by another group of individuals in a different room to demonstrate how much calories we actually intake as individuals when we go to restaurants.
Scientific research indicates that if we are shown how much exercise it takes to burn off the calories we consume, we'll eat less.
It talks a lot about the misrepresentation and the misunderstanding around calories. What are calories? What do they mean? And how much calories am I actually consuming?
A recent study suggests that we underestimate the number of calories we consume by around a third.
Kilocalories are a measure of energy, or more specifically, it's the amount of energy that is needed to raise 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. Our main calories are found within macro and micronutrients.
Pure carbohydrate contains 4 calories per gram. Protein also contains 4 calories. But pure fat has a huge 9 calories per gram.
If you look at that, the calories from the butter and the calories from the bread are pretty much the same, but tasty, right?
Gladiators, ready!
Ladies and gentlemen, in the red corner, the gladiator Amazon Zoe G.P. Williams, aka the Amazon from Gladiator. Gladiators, you shall go on my first whistle. That's the worst Scottish accent I've ever heard of in my life.
You will go on my first whistle.
In the blue corner, he is a Michelin star restaurateur, Frank Sirieix. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
Now why have I got this in my hand? The use of the experts was very interesting. Frank Sirieix, who is a Michelin star restaurateur, as mentioned, he knows a lot about the restaurant chain business, how people work, how to extort more money, get more money from their victims, customers, and how to best serve them more alcoholic drink, beverages, food. But he knows sort of all about the science behind it. GP Zoe Williams, Amazoness herself, knows very much a lot about the fitness side. However, she does not necessarily know the business elements behind being a restaurateur. The other use of the experts, the nutritionist, the fitness instructor, are all highly detailed, highly knowledgeable in what they do.
Muscles you're recruiting to do the exercise and the size of those muscles. What you can probably see is that most of the energy expenditure is coming from the legs here. Yeah. And then at the top of the stroke, you can see that the biceps are working as well, and also the back.
The genetics regarding fat itself and how you consume and how you think of calories itself can be genetically predisposed to a certain extent.
1,000 genes in the human genome, around 350 have been identified as influencing our weight.
So, regarding the genetic information and that effect upon whether you'll be obese or not is actually a lot more complex than you think. Now, we really have to talk about predisposition. In terms of genetics, there are certain genes that may make you more predisposed to behave in a certain way or to put on extra fat mass.
That then influences whether or not you look like Santa Claus. Some of them predispose you, make you more susceptible to being slightly heavier, sometimes only by a few grams, sometimes by a kilo, play a role in influencing our feeding behavior. At the end of the day, the only way to gain weight is still to put the piece of food in your mouth.
Now, predisposed does not necessarily mean that you will have it. And if you do have let's say, a physiological defect, so say for instance an overactive or underactive thyroid gland, it still does not mean that you will be obese. There are so many individual variables, and we have to take that into account. We have to take into account how much activity people do, because that is actually a good regulator about whether someone will be obese or not.
Our genetics has not changed. This change in our body weight has happened against a constant genetic background.
But today, these cavemen genetics are challenged with food that is cheaper and easier to access, FTO gene. It makes people more likely to overeat and choose high-calorie foods.
40 to 45% have it. Now, if you have 2 copies of it, which about 1 billion people in the world do, then you are on average 3 kilograms heavier and 50% more likely to become obese, sensitive to exercise.
So, 2 statements. Your genetics only equate to roughly 10% chance of whether you be fat. To a certain extent, correct. It only equates to 90% chance that you will be fat. Likewise, also correct. Whoa! My God, mind blown. So how can both statements both be accurate? And by the way, they can also be inaccurate as well. Huh? Surely everything is binary, everything is black and white. Well, not in fitness and certainly not in science. What we need to talk about is part of my 4 pillars, how to disseminate information. Cause and causality are not always the same, and that's one thing we've got to remember. We've also got to take in context and nuance. And with genetics, there is a whole ton of context and nuance. For instance, you could have these certain genes, but because one of these segments of genes, or even one gene, is maybe an A and not a T, for instance, because they mark it out in letters, that prevents you from having these genetic predispositions. So the answer to it's everything interacts with each other when it comes to genetics. Sometimes the way we find out its impact on genetics is through an association. So no direct cause. Think of it like a car. If you don't know how to run your car, or what a car is or works, you know it works, but you don't know how. The car is running, but how can I stop it from running? I take the steering wheel off, but those wheels keep turning round. Okay, so that's clearly not the gene that does it. Maybe if I pull out the spark plugs, okay, I've now stopped the car. So therefore, the spark plugs must be the thing that makes the car work. No, they do not make the wheels go round. They do not give you the energy to make the wheels go round. It's only associated with, and that's basically genetics in a nutshell. We have also got to take in the psychological and neurological impacts by the genetics, well as the physiologically dominant impact. The genes that physically control your thyroid gland, for instance. I am using that as an example because that's probably the most clearest. The psychological and neurological one is heavily dependent upon your social environment and your social learning theory. Whereas this one is more dictated by nature, but it doesn't mean you can't nurture these results. And this is where the idea of thermogenics and the caloric balance comes into play.
1,000 calories. And the average healthy weight man 2,500.
Put the same amount of energy or calories in as we burn off, and we maintain our weight. Put more in than we use, and we gain weight. The average adult eats around 300 excess calories a day. Over a month, this could lead to a weight gain of as much as 3 pounds.
So when it comes to genetics, take for instance GP, the Amazon Zoe Williams. Why is she not obese, even though she has those genetic traits? It's because she keeps herself fit and active. And there may also be some other genetics that kind of interplay as well. Utilising Goddess Shah, the fetish model, as far as we know, she does not have, I'm not surmising here, but just an example, have any genetic traits that do make her obese. But she has decided to become obese anyway, to make money and other fetish things. She does not keep herself in a caloric balance, meaning she consumes more than what she takes in. And seemingly, I do have to admit myself, they utilised a really cool way to explain caloric balance.
So this glass represents your total daily energy expenditure, which represents your resting metabolic rate. And then there's muscle. So muscle is burning calories as well, even when you're not using it, just at rest. For a healthy weight man, it's about 345 calories a day, and for a healthy weight woman, about 280 calories. Also, men tend to carry a higher percentage of muscle compared to women. In fact, a typical man has around a third more muscle than a typical woman. About 10% of the calories we consume are burnt digesting, metabolising and absorbing the food we eat. So everything from chewing the food, it being absorbed in the small intestine, to then utilising it to repair the body, build new cells, build new muscle. Physical energy expenditure burns around 30% of the daily calorie intake for the average person. Any physical activity, it's just daily movement. Even fidgeting, people who fidget will burn more calories, but exceed that daily allowance and our bodies store the extra energy as fat. There's not a great deal we can do to increase our resting metabolic rate. There's not a great deal we can do to increase our dietary-induced thermogenesis, but we really can increase our daily physical activity.
So, what is thermogenics? Thermogenics is heavily related to burning heat. It basically means the art of creating heat, and that is exactly what your metabolism is. In a layman's basic terms, it's referring to your caloric balance. When we refer to caloric balance, if we were to, on a caloric scale, so imagine this is a scale, that scale, the more you intake, the less you burn off, the more weight you put on. That's called a caloric surplus. If you're maintaining, that's the caloric balance. And if you're burning off more calories than you utilise, then that is referred to
caloric deficit.
How much does genes play a role in our weight and caloric balance? Well, the answer to that is we really don't know. But it's surmised it only equates to a small percentage. And small changes to these genes will not necessarily equate to you gaining large or losing massive amounts of weight. So, the vast majority of weight you put on is what you shove down your neck, and by not exercising. So it's a mixture of both, 50-50. If you don't train and eat loads, you will gain weight. If you eat enough and train enough, you will lose weight or maintain. Everything is an average, everything is a big guess when it comes to calories in terms of how much you consume. Now, one way to work out whether calories eaten are good is a bomb calorimeter. However, I'm going to get your cheesecake, whack it into a bomb calorimeter and burn the fucker to death. You're not going to have a cheesecake at the end of it. So we need to get an average of how much these are from these cheesecakes. So the cheesecake you're eating is not necessarily the cheesecake that has been given to you in terms of its calories. Slight differences probably. And the way and the amount you burn off caloric-wise just existing is going to be very much different. Everyone's metabolism is different. And that adds to the caloric balance. And that's what some people don't realise. There was also really interesting in-depth nature in talking about microbiomes with the current knowledge that we do have. However, I would say this was not as in-depth as previous Horizon episodes, but then likewise, it wasn't specifically focusing on bacteria in your gut or the other stuff in your gut helping you lose weight or gain weight.
The microbiome is the community of all the microscopic bugs that are in our body.
Yuck!
And they consist of standard bacteria, then you've got fungi, you've got yeast, parasites, and you've also got little viruses that feed off them.
So what is a microbiome? Well, your body, if you like, it's like an ecosystem. And as a result, they can help you break down fat lipids, store fat lipids. use up those energies, for instance. They basically live on the same things that you live off.
We think that's because your immune system's working better, you're not producing inflammation in the body, so it's not in a stressed state, and that seems to affect all the metabolism.
We have a symbiotic relationship with them.
Microbes, they have an ability to produce special enzymes that break down fat, and they create something, these bile salts. And if there's plenty of these bile salts, you're going to break down that fat much faster than someone who doesn't have those same microbes. Low levels in people who are overweight, if you can eat 30 or more different types of plant a week, every nut, every seed, every herb and spice is in fact derived from a plant, are all prebiotics. They're fertilizers of microbes, and they're going to help grow new species. And then, of course, you've got probiotics, so these are live microbes in the food itself.
They also look at the social environments we find ourselves in.
It's about the sheer availability of food. And what that's encouraging people to do is to snack outside of meal times.
So, percentage-wise, you're more likely to be larger and gain more weight and eat more fast food when there is more fast food available to you within walking distance of. So high streets, for instance, that have a lot of fast food chains will often have a lot of obese people in those surrounding environments, more so than areas that don't. This could also be based down to social demographics. Poorer areas, generally more fast food, but we shouldn't necessarily equate that to being more obese. It just makes you more likely in certain parts of the Western world, and not necessarily generally within certain nations. Got that done and over with? In other words, there's so many social variables, we cannot give cause and causality together.
I think we really need the government to step in and help to change the kind of world we live in. You know, every time we see an advert for food, it primes us to want to eat something. And at the end of the day, obesity is caused by people eating too much.
Now, the expert they brought on about social environments, the person who's lobbying to get the certain environment to change because it impacts our habits and our eating habits, can lead to an obsogenic environment, which basically means priming and affects our decision making consciously and unconsciously. And this also affects your reality in decision making. Sometimes we think we are making a decision to eat healthy food, but in reality it's everything else that's made us think of that decision to do. And we are thinking about decisions and what to eat all the time.
Removing advertising gives people genuine freedom of choice.
In terms of priming, and this is where marketing is fucking awesome at. You create a brand around a certain idea, so you prime them with an idea, subliminally or non-subliminally, depending which country you're from.
别打你的二破拳了，来条 Snickers。 兄弟，怎么样？
And people will get that glimpse of that idea. The more you push it, the more chances are people are likely to buy it. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. This generates what is referred to as a schema, an idea, an identity, a brand, which you can then relate to. If you can relate to it on an emotional level, you're more likely to buy that product. However, the expert they brought on was really good. It was only one side of that scientific argument. They could have brought someone else with a slightly varying different idea on the social environments and how they impact obesity, which there are many scientific ideas around relating to this, and have them explain it, or at least get Dr. G.P. Williams to explain it afterwards, which they didn't. But this could be because they would have been them being pressed for time.
For every gram of pure alcohol, there are 7 calories. So even though you're only having a small amount of it, actually, it's a very calorific drink.
You really did well to explain certain things, if probably a little wee bit too basic.
Percentage point, the alcohol in your pint increases, you can add 32 calories to the total.
Just because alcohol contains calories doesn't mean it makes us eat any less. Actually, there are studies showing that alcohol does reduce our inhibitions, but there's got to be something physiological going on here as well. They think there's a change in the neuronal response in those mice that is the same neuronal response that happens in starvation. Studies have shown when you drink, you particularly seem to enjoy and get more food reward from foods that are high in fat.
However, One thing she didn't explain within decision making is when something is 50% fat relatively to 50% carbs. Heavily laden, sodden, high calorific food. Cheesecake. Believe it or not, cheesecake is really caloric and your body likes it. That's why it feels so light to eat it. 50% fat carbs triggers something in the brain to think, yeah, I like that, I want more. Yes, individual differences, some people have more savoury and salt mind, but that is another thing that's vaguely related but not necessarily related. So we're going to keep it on topic, simple to understand within this parameters of the 50% fat, 50% carbs within a particular product. When we were cavemen or having to hunt, something that was high like that, 50% fat, 50% carbs, naturally then you want to eat more of it because you're then able to sustain the vast majority of your macronutrients potentially from those foods. However, the weird thing is, quite a lot of the foods we eat now that are like that aren't naturally found in the environment. I don't see any flying cheesecakes, for example. Oh, there goes one right there. Yep, that's correct, that is right. That definitely is a flying cheesecake. Yep. That is a flying cheesecake, alright. Now, partly our decision makings, and they didn't explain this to you because it would have gone well off topic, but I can explain it to you. Our decision makings relatively within a capitalist democracy based upon two particular principles. When we look at Marxist, talks about production and the ability to produce their product. That's great, but if no one is consuming their product, you don't make money. And if you don't make money, then the workers don't work. And if the workers don't work, then everyone goes bust. What we really have is consumption, production and consumption. If you have someone consuming said product, you're more likely to increase the yield, the money made, the buying product that then helps your own pockets as the villainous reptiles in charge, but also the workers who then have paid work to work. In a capitalist democracy, it's your decision. How much of that is your decision is debatable, but it's your decision to buy Z product. But I can influence or manipulate your decisions to buy Z product. The more you consume of Z product means the more money I make. So it doesn't make sense for me not to produce a product that is not addictive. And I'm going to use the word addictive very carefully if I can, because there's different types of addiction and I don't want to get bogged down in that argument in effectively what's going to be a half-hour video, because then we'll be here for an hour. I'm going to make this product highly palatable. What you want, so you buy more. You like this product. You get in the habit of eating that product, not necessarily binge eating it, or some people would eat it beyond their necessary means, but some people may just eat the product and like the product. And if you eat the product and like the product, I make more money because you buy more of that product. Now, the interesting thing around calories is that they did not explain the impact of caloric loss. And they talked about all of these within as if they have an individual impact rather than a joint impact upon the body. Now, I wonder whether fat acceptance had a role and body positivity had a role in influencing that. And really one minor teeny weeny point talking about the title itself, and that it may be triggering and potentially misleading, and that's where the controversy lies.
Now, there was a lot of backlash against the show, and Ofcom, the regulator, received complaints regarding the show being aired. There were public complaints too on Twitter from eating charities such as Beat. The irony is, officially there was a whopping 6 complaints, all made before the show was aired. Yes, that's right, Daily Mail, a swarm. I can understand if you had a mental health issue, and by watching such a show could be triggering for you, then you need to do what you need to do for your own mental health and well-being. However, what point raised about the show's credibility beyond initial impressions is utterly invalid if you have not watched it also. This is not me saying that eating disorders arguments are invalid, far from it.
People often do the opposite, so they go and exercise, it says they've burnt 200 calories, so then they go and think, oh, I can have an extra 200 calories now. That kind of defeats the purpose. If you're doing that for the calorie burn, why just cancel it out?
A counterpoint for this argument is the fact that 63% of adults in the UK are overweight, and engaging people about their dangerous habits can only be beneficial. These messages and complaints by people highlight the importance of context.
By researchers from Loughborough University found that when menus showed how much exercise would be required to burn off the calories contained within the dishes, people chose to eat less. It's predicted that if the system were widely adopted, it could shave nearly 200 calories off the average person's daily consumption.
Does it represent what is stated in the actual documentary itself? Yes, it does. Is it misleading in terms of relating to the information in terms of how body positivity see it? In the fact that it may be triggering? Yes, and that's the point. To some people, who might get butthurt from it, potentially triggering with the wrong information because they perceive that information incorrectly or misread that information incorrectly. And if you were to gauge that from the title, then hell yeah, probably you might do. But in reality, we have to look at the information and the scientific information. It's so damn good in this. You have to look with it within context, not just think calories are bad, we must burn them all off. If I eat a takeaway, well yeah, it's probably helpful. But likewise, you must look at the information within context, within nuance, individual differences, and realise that cause and causality are not necessarily the same. They are the 4 principles to reading and understanding scientific information. And if you guys want to hear it, I'll make a video about that shit. Likewise guys, if you think this is controversial, let me know down in the comments.
Is that bad for me?
Are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it, yeah.
We'll see what the damage is later.
What I did think was really good was they really explained well the science and the ongoing sciences that is happening with research. And that's something that's not very well done. Horizon are awesome at it and they have always been awesome at this. However, a negative is that they probably could have explained a lot of the research in better detail. Their own experiment. Was it really that scientific? No. In reality, it's a crap experiment. Calories, for instance. You cannot accurately predict a calorie eaten unless I take you in the laboratory and work that out. Yes, you can do it by indirect caloric means, but they're still not that accurate, really.
In terms of production value and quality, well, it's a BBC programme, need I say more? It was based on a Loughborough University study which found that when menus showed how much exercise was required to burn off the calories in dishes, people chose to eat less. The research predicted that if the system was widely adopted, it could shave nearly 200 calories of the average person's daily consumption. Turning that into a television concept isn't easy, hence this gimmicky show. Horizon opens a restaurant with a difference. The back of the house is a fully functioning gym, where a group of fitness fanatics are poised and ready to burn off every single calorie the other group has ordered and consumed. The information was well researched, slick and basic to understand. It got the PT information and brought it out into the mainstream. But in terms of understanding the singular study it was based upon, this seems really heavy duty and possibly unnecessary for a show to be over an hour long to explain.